throughout cinema history, a history that reflected the values of the public, the only characters that celebrated death were considered psychotic. In a film that closely resembles the current state of America, with two sides struggling to coexist, then showing joyous, rapturous bloodlust of the victor. I don't know what you're trying to do here, Alex, but objectivity left the theater a long time ago.
Light me, Johnny.
The Brahmins, they keep you from being proud.
Look at him. He looks silly, doesn't he? Upside down.
Civil War Movie Review. No spoiler for the first half, then I'll give a warning and it'll be spoilers from then on out. Like the old adage, when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Civil War's director Alex Garland doesn't want to overtly name names when it comes to the players on the stage of his film about a hypothetical civil war that fractures the United States. Not naming names might win you friends in the mafia, but not with online movie critics. No one is labeled liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, although many Americans do identify as such. These two sides of our current culture war are largely a creation of the media and the two dominant political parties themselves. What else can you say when polling shows Americans are largely in agreement on almost every major issue? That says to me that we're not divided, but that doesn't help with platform engagement. It's not click-worthy. It's not good for generating ad revenue. Turning us against each other is. Why so serious, Alex? Such a grim, dour piece of filmmaking. You're not delving deep into anything here. You're not examining the issues facing regular Americans. If anything, like in the real world, this is another piece of media made by the wealthy elite showing Americans divided and at each other's throats. Interesting, this point is ignored in a film that centers on members of the media as its central characters. Although, to be fair, the photojournalists in question are stringers, freelancers who don't work directly for the multinational conglomerates that control much of the media that we, the public, consumes. I think the more edgier, radical, iconoclastic, definitely more satisfying film would have addressed the media's role in creating the current American fracture. However, Garland might argue that the universe in which this fictional film takes place doesn't have the same variables at play. I guess in this universe we hate each other for good reasons? It seems odd and kind of a cop-out, in this day and age, to do a film about a civil war in America and not mention Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, who, I'd argue, many of us would imagine, would be at the center of such a conflict. But I digress. The film starts out with Lee, played by Kirsten Dunst, and her colleague Joel, played by Wagner Moura, better known as Pablo Escobar. We meet them covering a protest. Lee carries the trauma of her experiences covering war zones, and there are some graphic flashbacks to be had. A young photojournalist, Jessie, well played by Kaylee Spaley, is starstruck by Lee, who gives her some professional tips on covering violent situations. Adding Stephen McKinley Henderson's Sammy to the mix, our heroes set off on a dystopian American odyssey. They are on their way to Washington, D.C. to try and get an interview with the president before he vacates office. One way or the other, as many believe his reign is coming to an end, with the opposing Western forces a few hundred miles outside the capital. It's a harrowing adventure that, as a fan of what I call dark adventures, Escape from New York, The Thing, Children of Men, I kinda didn't want it to end. This review will be weird because in some ways I'm very critical of this piece, and yet I do love a good dark adventure. I guess I just wish that this dark adventure wasn't landing so close to home. I don't understand the film's logic that the journalists want to reach DC to interview the president because they know the Western forces are going to execute him on sight. This kind of thing rarely happens in modern times, especially in a Western country, and one that knows the power of the image, especially the image of your opponent cuffed and frog-marched in an orange jumpsuit. You kill him, you run the risk of making him a martyr. You grab him and put him on trial, you legitimize your power grab. The victors do this because they know they are writing the narrative for the future. It's clear to me that Garland and the film's producers want to give Trump haters something to sink their teeth into. Maybe it's better to vent one's political spleen through the catharsis of cinema instead of through real-world violence. But it still reinforces a might makes right worldview. If I have to explain why that's a bad idea, we're already lost. The cast did a great job with a script that struggles in terms of connecting us with the characters. Dunst is great in scenes with dialogue, or when in the throes of processing her trauma. Hey, here's a teen reading a book? This is an alternate universe. I found it hard to relate to any of the characters, except for Jesse's character. Most of us can relate to being the rookie, or the new hire at work, getting schooled on the do's and don'ts of a new job. You get a little bit of perfunctory backstory with the two female leads, none from the men. The film has the characters giving a lot of exposition. When they're not doing that, they're either lecturing or judging each other, or people that are not present. In this sense, the movie may have been a great representation of current-day America. Or at least, the characters may not represent actual Americans, but what it would be like if social media was a cast of characters. Judgmental, self-righteous, hectoring, unforgiving. Just when I would feel some pathos for Joel or Lee, there's either her stiff indifference or his yucking it up with soldiers, militia, irregulars, boogaloo boys, as they execute unarmed prisoners. Yeah, murder kinda kills the relatability. I know he's not doing it, and having emotional distance from tragedy is probably essential for that occupation. But when there's not a lot else going on to connect me with a character, I don't find their indifference or emotional disconnect cool. I feel sorry for them that they have been conditioned to disregard the value of human life. In that sense, they are very much American. But what kind of American? We'll get to that later. Even though the president's party is not named and it is not overtly stated which political parties support the different forces arrayed, it seems pretty obvious to me, especially as the film plays out, that Nick Offerman's character's administration is a stand-in for you-know-who. Although Nick Offerman's hair has been made to resemble Clinton's more than Trump's. The reasons that our heroes seem to have animosity toward the current president seem to be him taking a third term and firing on civilians, which ironically has occurred under Democratic presidents, FDR and Woodrow Wilson respectively. It's also not made clear whether or not the third term that he occupies was the result of an election or if he just decided to stay. Life is cheap in war, and especially in the US, where kids wear t-shirts that say, "Kill 'em all, let God sort 'em out." I was glad the film did not shy away from this. Scenes of unarmed people surrendering to the quote-unquote good guy Western forces, only to be gunned down in cold blood. The film does do a good, albeit limited job, especially considering the main mentor-mentee relationship between the two leads, of showing the toll that being a photojournalist takes on people who undertake the profession. Lee is tormented by many of the conflicts that she has covered in the past, and this does nicely dovetail into her character's journey toward the end of the film. This film review was kind of a bum out for me. As I said, I love post-apocalyptic dystopian films, as the name of the channel might suggest, so I really wanted to like it. What I like? It reminds me a bit of Children of Men, especially in that you come into the whole shebang in media res, right in the middle of things. It's a great way to enter a story like this, not bothering with tedious, extraneous exposition. Let the audience figure out the world. It engages the audience and makes us more active in the story, and if done right, can add a lot of mystery. Again, the cast is great. Thumbs up all around. And there's some good dialogue too. Many familiar scenes that are almost tropes for dystopian films at this point, but the writers managed to come up with some fresh takes. The battle scenes are pretty well done and choreographed, especially at the end, which I won't give away, but that brings us neatly to spoilers. There be spoilers from here on out. The scene at the end with the president's motorcade attempting a smash through the blockade was pretty thrilling. I wish there was a bit more of this kind of thing in the movie, but it's not really what this film was about. And one last screenwritery thing about the protagonist. Although it seems that Kirsten Dunst's character was the protagonist, for most of the film I thought the character of Jesse was, in what I call the buried protagonist. Like the Robert the Bruce character in Braveheart, or Corporal Upham in Saving Private Ryan, or the war boy Nux in Mad Max Fury Road. All of these characters are the real protagonists of the films in which they live, or die, even though it seems like other, more high-profile characters are the protagonists. And it seemed like Jesse was going in this direction as well. We think it's Dunst, but Jesse will end up being the protagonist. Then the end happens, and I'm like, oh wow, a character arc from Lee. A decisive act showing a dramatic change in the character's worldview. And most importantly, it felt earned. I just want to say nicely done to the writers on that end. Now the Plemons character. I thought the character Jesse Plemons plays was going to be a military representative. A shell-shocked captain with a dubious moral compass. They run into him at a checkpoint and they're forced to negotiate with him, something like that. Turns out, he's just a psycho. I thought that there was going to be something more interesting or challenging in regard to his query, "What kind of American are you?" Something speaking to what every citizen might identify with, while dancing on the razor's edge of not knowing where this burnt-out kangaroo court judge was leading you. That he might be asking them something that answering might make them vulnerable, but might also get them off the hook. But nope, he's just a mass-murdering racist psycho. Kind of a letdown. A lost opportunity to explore some of our current divisions. Sammy suspects he might have killed everyone in his town, and might not even be military at all. And although I was hoping for something more thematically compelling from the exchange with Plemons, the scene does illustrate what most of war is: mass murder and mass rape, punctuated by the battles that will be written in the history books. We just think of the battles. We don't think about the mass rape and murder. As an aside, Plemons is literally wearing red-shaded glasses, as you might have remembered from the trailer. Seeing the world through rose-colored glasses? Does this suggest that the character viewing the world in the racist, simplistic manner that he does is perversely, overly, optimistic? You can't or shouldn't just view people in an overly simplistic fashion, which is how the character views people. It's not fair, and is more often wildly inaccurate. However, the same could be said for the writers who wrote this character: overly simplistic, and more often than not, wildly inaccurate. Look, I'm sure guys like this exist, and I wouldn't want to run across them when society breaks down, or any time for that matter. But let's face it, the media pushes the notion that half of America is populated with this guy. I've been all over this country, and I'll tell you that is BS. Again, showing people as people doesn't generate clicks, or ad revenue. Again, I'm not saying this guy doesn't exist, just be aware that his type populates a lot of the film. And let's face it, parading out a string of nice white guys isn't why I bought a ticket. Now, I look forward to an Alex Garland film. He's made some that I really like. But here, he's a master propagandist, on par with Leni Riefenstahl. When you gin people up for war instead of showing our shared humanity, you have chosen a side. Or in today's America, as part of the elite, you're setting up two sides to fight each other while you watch from the balcony. I gotta say something about the music. The soundtrack has some good tunes, some classic punk and rap, but the way these tracks are employed is bewildering, in ways that can really only suggest that our director has clearly chosen who the bad guys are. When U.S. government forces are captured and summarily executed, including unarmed wounded, the dour mood is uplifted by a vibrant De La Soul track. And there's a cheery, happy musical accompaniment to go along with the smiling, diverse group of soldiers who stand over the president they've just killed. It really makes me feel like an alien on my own planet, celebrating death. We're so conditioned. It's such an American thing to do. I don't mean to harp on it, but there's no joy on Dennis Dunn or Kurt Russell's face when they defeat Lopan and Big Trouble in Little China. There's no joy in Upham's face when he kills the soldier that he argued to be released, who ended up killing Captain Miller. There's no smile on Mad Max's face after he takes out the biker gang that killed his family. Or on Private Joker's, who took the life of the sniper who killed his friend Cowboy. It seemed that we better understood that in the past. Throughout cinema history, a history that reflected the values of the public, the only characters that celebrated death were considered psychotic. In a film that closely resembles the current state of America, with two sides struggling to coexist, then showing joyous, rapturous bloodlust of the victor. I don't know what you're trying to do here, Alex, but objectivity left the theater a long time ago. Again, love the cast, and it's a mixed bag of characters. However, from the Trump-like president in the opening to good old Jesse Crazy on Demand Plemons, pretty much all the white men are pure evil, and non-whites and women are alternately heroes and victims. There's an idyllic, peaceful, all-white small town untouched by the conflict. Yet all the non-white characters are housed in a giant refugee camp. Strange, or incongruous, both Jesse and Lee's characters mention their families who are living on farms, small towns, pretending the war isn't happening. Then they roll into this small town, that's pretending the war isn't happening, and our main characters are shocked by this. How could this be? Why are you shocked? You just told us you both knew people acting like this, and even gave superior smirks like, "It's a problem that so many people are pretending the war doesn't exist." I'll tell you what's happening in the US today, with regular Americans being conditioned to hate each other on either side of a culture war, I'd rather be with the people who are ignoring this self-imposed strife. I love post-apocalyptic dystopian films. They usually help me escape life and take me to some other place on an adventure. This one just made me feel depressed and made me wonder, if we keep this up, how far off are we from getting to this point? Thanks for clicking in.
Lieutenant, don't you dare subscribe to his channel.
You cocksucker, you fucking